Hello, I'm the Past Master. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about why the past matters. Not just to me, but also to you. So I think it's true to say that many people tell us we all have a book in us. And the reality is that that book is made up of our past, our experiences, our skills, the things that we've learned, the people that we are. In fact, our identities are our past. That's why people looking for an extension of their knowledge often try to find out more about their families. And many people on Who Do You Think You Are, for example, the celebrity family history program, will make associations with the people that they find out about. So people who've done similar things, perhaps entertainers who are the ancestors of entertainers, or in the case of Danny Dyer, kings who are the ancestors of the so-called King of Essex. So he liked to see these attributes, these kingly attributes of his forebears in himself. Now, history is an extraordinarily rich source of ideas and of stories. And if we travel beyond our own families and their journeys, we can find some of the greatest stories, both of fiction and of non-fiction. So in the fiction world, we can see that even some of our greatest fiction authors, like, for example, J.R.R. Tolkien, have used knowledge of the past to tell a better story. So, for example, in The Fellowship of the Ring, J.R.R. Tolkien tells the story of the death of Boromir, and Boromir fights to the death to defend the Fellowship of the Ring, which he nearly betrayed. He takes numerous injuries and fights on, and finally he is overwhelmed by the orcs. But this story is very similar. It echoes a story from the Battle of Maldon, an epic Anglo-Saxon poem, which Tolkien, as a professor of Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic studies, would have known very well. So in the Battle of Maldon, the leader, Britnoth, is betrayed by many of his friends, but he fights on against the Vikings, takes 3 or 4 wounds, and finally is killed. That's very, very similar to the scene you see in Peter Jackson's movie of The Fellowship of the Ring. Now, there isn't really any reason, apart from our enjoyment of escapism, why history should be written into novels. History is extraordinary enough on its own, and in fact, you often hear the phrase, "you couldn't make it up," as an explanation for why the bizarrest stories are often the truest ones. So a good example of this is the way in which the obsession with Adolf Hitler led to the forged Hitler diaries in the 1980s and the efforts of a group of Hitler enthusiasts to pass them off as real, aided, initially anyway, by several historians, one of whom was an eminent Cambridge historian, Lord Dacre. Another historian who was recruited then became the first historian to denounce the Hitler diaries as forgeries, and in a bizarre turn of events, the last historian to say that they were real, David Irving. So you might say you couldn't make it up. Unfortunately, the same is true of the subject matter of the diaries, Adolf Hitler. Now, it's often said that the past is a resource that we can learn from. However, the DNA of history, the way in which similar events occur in different ways, means that the lessons we can learn from history have to be carefully learned. And often what we learn is not quite what we expect. Now, the past is not really just a foreign country, as it's often called. It is a foreign continent. And even the same country can look very different if you learn about it in different time periods. So the picturesque and exciting nature of these different pasts is explored again in television through shows like Doctor Who, where the Doctor often time travels to the past and meets a variety of characters, sees a variety of clothing styles, of customs, and so forth, which are linked to one of these many different countries. The past is also explored by historians in a time-travelling way. They like to put us into a situation where we can imagine living in that past. So, for example, Ian Mortimer has written a series of books called The Time Traveller's Guide to medieval England, Elizabethan England, that sort of thing. And on television, we've seen how writers with less commitment, perhaps, to the truth could put Blackadder and others into different historical environments. Now, the past is not just a place where we can see a different world, a whole new world from different eyes, with different customs and different pressures. It's also a place where we can find the knowledge that we need to make the world new. So historians are the gatekeepers to human knowledge which is written down or transferred by word of mouth from generation to generation. That knowledge is not just knowledge of the past, it is knowledge that we have gained in the past. So everything from geography to mathematics and physics. In fact, one of our greatest scientists, Isaac Newton, wrote in one of his letters, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants," a reference to the accumulated knowledge of the past, which made it possible for him to make the extraordinary breakthroughs in the science of light and motion and gravity, as we often call it. And this phrase, this idea, is so important that it is included in text on our current £2 coins. Historians form a gateway to knowledge from the past, partly by being critics. And the past is interesting as a study because it helps us to make sense of how we learn, to make sense of the information that is out there. So historians have to learn to be selective, they have to learn to interpret and gather evidence. For that reason, history skills are useful to a wide range of professions, from lawyers to detectives to journalists. All of these people benefit from the ideas of the past and the studies of the past. History, in its essence, though, is really about another skill. It is the skill of writing a historical story. And that skill was epitomised and summarised in the work of the first historian, Herodotus. I say the first historian because his book, The Histories, is the first known history book, and he is sometimes known as the father of history. So this is what he wrote, a translation, since he was an ancient Greek, of the first paragraph of his writing. Herodotus of Halicarnassus presents his research so that human events do not fade with time. May the great and wonderful deeds, some brought forth by the Hellenes, some by the barbarians, not go unsung, as well as the causes that led them to make war on each other. So, in about 2 sentences, Herodotus has explained why he decided, the first historian decided to write history, what it was all about for him. Great deeds should not go unsung. Research. He wanted to present his research. So this was about telling us a true story, as he saw it, gathered from evidence. It was also about singing the great deeds. It was about presenting something like the great poet Homer had done before. For that reason, Herodotus is sometimes challenged as the father of lies, because people sometimes believe that he presented things to make a good story that weren't actually true. And it is the privilege and the paradox of the historian's position that they must try to present the past in a sense that we can relate to it. They must present both the story and the accuracy if they want to make history.